as well as the wife battering, as well as rape. So we specifically highlighted that when you're looking at the concept of rape in violence against women, it's mainly common in countries where there's a lot of conflict, right? Tribal conflicts. Okay, so now in this unit will be discuss. Unit 4 is the cultural impact on gender. So looking at the cultural impact on gender, it just determines what methods or what highlighted elements within our cultural settings affect the gender relations. So in introduction, some of the most compelling evidence against strong biological determination of gender roles come from anthropologists. So we are saying that it comes from anthropologists because they are, in their line of discipline, they studied the variations of a lot of things that have happened to humankind for a long time. So their work looks at the pre-industrial societies that demonstrate some of the striking gender variations from one culture to another. So this creates a bargaining point when you're looking at what are the cultural variations that are present across cultures, because you're looking at the historical aspect as well. And this variation underscores the impact on culture on how females and males think and behave, because it is within their cultural expectations that determine the specific characteristics that are present in related to their gender roles. So the cross-cultural historical gender patterns suggest that there is extensive evidence where the impact comes from anthropologist George Murdoch, who created the standard cross-cultural sample of almost 200 pre-industrialized societies. So he was the society studied by anthropologists. So Murdoch found that some tasks in these societies, such as hunting, trapping, are almost always done by men, right? While other tasks, such as cooking, fetching water, are almost always done by women. So um, when you're looking at these pre-industrialized societies and the roles that have been identified, we're going to look at it further when we introduce you module 3, right? So you just keep that in mind, the pre-industrialized gender roles that were present and were identified by the anthropologists. So this pattern provide evidence for the evolutionary argument. So represented area as they probably stem from the biological differences between the sexes. So even so, there's at least some societies in which women hunted and in which men cooked and fetched water. So he's just trying to create a difference in terms of the evolutionary principle of household chores as well as expectations by the society. So moreover, Murdoch found that the greater gender variation in several of the other tasks he studied, including planting crops, milking, generating fires. So men primarily perform these tasks in some societies, and women primarily perform them in other societies. So generally that variation between the societies. And still other societies, both sexes perform them in equality. Murdoch's findings illustrate how gender roles differ from one culture to another and imply that they are not biologically determined. So according to him, he found further investigations where although all societies distinguished femaleness and maleness, additional gender categories exist in some societies. So one of those is the Native American tribe known as the Mohave, for example, recognize 4 genders. So they recognize the 4 genders, which is a woman who acts like a man, and also a man who acts like a woman. So when you're looking at this specific narrative of saying the 4 genders, where yes, there's a man and a woman, but then there's a man and a woman who acts as the opposite sex, it is in relation to the fact that the expectations of the society, or not necessarily the expectations of society, but then the expectation of what is supposed to happen in terms of a woman, for example, or a man. A very good example would be maybe being a provider or protecting of a household. It's supposedly societally it's expected that it's supposed to be a man, right? But then if they are only women, they have to be sort of a backing point for certain women to sort of project that particular characteristic and enable some sort of a balance in terms of division of the work. So in that sense, what we're trying to say is, for example, if in a community there are only women, right? And we are saying that women are the ones that, for example, they cook and they fetch water, then who is going to go out hunting, right? So in a modern society, we would say that if there's only we are in an aspect where a community and there are only women, then for example, looking at the protection of the household and also taking care financially of the household, right? So it means a woman technically is going to inhibit the characteristics of a man that has been projected by the society. And furthermore, you are looking at, for example, a man who maybe he was married, right? And he had children and the wife dies. Who is going to take care of those children? So he has to sort of exhibit both characteristics. So in some societies, a third and intermediary gender category is recognized. So anthropologists call this the Beshad. So this is more of like a, we are going to look at it further, it's more of an androgyny. So usually a man who takes on a woman's role. So that is relatively somewhere like the example of a man, for example, who has to take care of the household because there isn't a woman to do those things around the house. So these intermediate categories combines the aspect of both femininity and masculinity of the society, which has found to consider the androgynous gender. So that androgynous gender is just either a man who exhibits characteristics of both a man and a woman, or the other way around. So although some people in this category are born intersexed, do you know what intersexed individuals are? No, they are not transgender. So intersexed people, intersexual people are those that are born with both eh, organs of a man and a woman, right? Yeah. So normally that person, they will exhibit both characteristics because they have both sexual organs, right? Yes. Formerly they were known as hermaphrodites. So meaning they have genitalia of both sexes. Many are born biologically as one sex. So they can be born either as a man or a woman, but then during Mana Madagaba, right, there has to be that physical examination to sort of determine everything. So that's when they find that that child also has the genitalia of another sex. So anthropologists have also found the androgynous gender composed of the women warriors in the 33 Native American groups in North America. These call themselves the women Amazons, noted that they dress like men and sometimes even marry women as well. In some tribes, girls exhibit such masculine characteristics from childhood, while in others, they may be recruited into the Amazonhood. And furthermore, in the Casca Indians, for example, a married couple with too many daughters would select one to be a man when she is about 5 years of age. So her parents would begin to dress her like a boy and have her to do male tasks. Eventually, she would grow up to become a hunter. So if the culture does not affect gender roles, socialization is the process. So we're saying that you are looking at the concept of the culture that determines the various characteristics, values, and also expectations in a society, right? So we know that in order for someone uh, to embody the culture, they have to be socialized using various agents, right? So the culture does affect the gender roles, and socialization is a process which culture has this effect. What we experience as girls and boys strongly influence how we develop as a woman and men in terms of behavior and attitudes. To illustrate this important dimension of gender, it turns to be evidence on socialization. So in the previous class, we were looking at, for example, the socialization we're giving where, let's say a girl who grew up in a household of only boys, right? She's going to exhibit characteristics, primarily those male characteristics, because she wasn't socialized or taught how to be a girl, right? And the same way a boy who grew up predominantly around women, it means their only method of understanding human relations is within the female aspect. So the socialization of gender looks at a process whereby individuals learn culture of their society. We learn our cultures of our society. For example, the way that we dress, the way that we talk, the way we interrelate with other people, and so on. So there are several agents of socialization that exist, including the family, the peers, schools, social media, religion. And all these institutions help to socialize people in their gender roles and help them develop their gender identity. So in modern times, we understand that. So in modern times, we understand the concept of social media primarily, right? Because you're trying to understand the differences or the experiences of people of your same group, whether they are that are of different geographical places, right? That's how you learn the various characteristics. Even although family we say primarily is the primary socializing agent, but then right now with coming in of social media, right? The family structure has sort of reduced some of its dominance in socialization. So the family socialization into gender roles begins at infancy. We discussed that in the second lesson, right? Where we're saying that parents generally treat their children differently depending on whether they are a boy or a girl, and so on. And we also look at how peers are a great influencer of socialization, right? Peers influence and also encourage gender socialization. As they reach school age, children begin to play different games based on age. And therefore, as a person, you sort of mimic it. We mimic the characteristics of those people that are around us. It, right now, it's not right now, but then we'd say that it's a constant term where we say peer pressure for you to behave in the way that you behave because of the people that are around you. And the second is the schools. School is yet another agent of socialization. So we look at, first of all, schools such as playground, location, link play activities. And furthermore, schools, particularly when you're looking at the importance of how teachers influence their students, right? So right now in the United States, being a country that is very liberalized, children are able to make their decisions in being supported by teachers their parents don't even know, right? So you've heard about this, that some children identifying as different genders at school because their parents, the teachers are enabling that. Akapita kunyumba, their parents don't really know about what is happening. So you are looking at this concept of teachers, particularly when you are looking at how they teach certain things, right? And also how they enable or we can say we as teachers we enable our students or those that we teach within certain aspects of social life. And we have mass media. This is generalized because people spend a lot of time watching television and social media and so on, and therefore we sort of learn the various gender roles from those expectations. And finally, we have religion. A very powerful gender socializing agent would be religion because you are looking at the Bible aspects, right? Um, so the major figures in the rest of the Bible are men, and women are for the most depicted as wives, mothers, and so on. So they are praised for their roles as wives and mothers and condemned for their other roles. So more generally, women are consistently depicted as the property of men, and therefore, when you're looking at from the religious perspective, it sort of creates the imbalances or inequalities between women and men because we are looking at it in reference to the Bible. Any questions on the socialization of gender? Okay. So we're going to look at the gender differentiation. The gender differentiation. So the gender role differentiation is defined as a process in which biological differences between men and women are assigned a social significance and used for social classification. So right there is the biological differences, right? The differences between men and women are used to sort of classify them socially, right? And put a social significance because of these biological differences. So globally, the anatomical sex is used as a basis for gender differentiation. However, we discuss gender differentiation in development and we go beyond the anatomy and we understand the social structures that use gender differentiation to determine types of social relations and classifications of gender. So the social structures that are present, for example, the education system, right? Or example, the work of the employment system that will sort of create a level of inequalities in recruitment of men and women depending on the role that is being recruited for. And gender differentiation can cause further explained under the framework of gender socialization model, which is a strand of social learning theory. So this is what we're discussing when we're looking at the gender socialization. So it is a strand of social learning theory because the social learning theory depicts that people become who they are because of who they associate the most with, right? So it is a widespread culture assumption that the most part of the world, the male child is given more preference than the female child, and people, family, and communities internalize this assumption uh, through systems of gender socialization and thus maintained by prevailing cultural systems. Have you heard of this thing? Well, it's been circulating on social media as a joke, but then it has been a true fact in a lot of Islamic-based and Arabic countries. Right? Which is the moment they have a child and they find that it's a girl, they'll congratulate the family, right? The woman, congratulations, it's a girl. Should we kill it? You know, like the owner killing it. It's like a joke, but then it's something that has been happening for a very long time in Arabic countries because of, particularly in Arabic and Islamic countries, because of the preferences of having a boy to a girl. So through the gender socialization mechanisms, specific messages and traditional practices about roles and attributes to different genders are passed through the generation. So it would be maybe the way that you walk, the way that you talk, even the depth of your voice, for example. Maybe and family would be like, but then when you're looking at it, it's just your vocal cords. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Or if, for example, I have a deeper voice, but there's nothing I can do because it's more of a vocal cord thing. But then when you're looking at these socializing agents, that sort of clarify in terms of specific messages of expectations, you are looking at how you respond to the various pressures around you. In the previous lesson, we were looking at confidence, for example, right? Confidence is an attribute that has been associated with being a man. When a woman exhibits confidence, she's usually coined or labeled the term as being difficult, right? Because of these various expectations. So gender role differentiation, in as much as it varies in societies, creates room for disparities between gender and leads to subservience of the much weaker sex by the classification. And these inequalities of gender is equally learned and internalized through socialization, transferred through agents of socialization. So you learn how to interact with boys or girls differently because of those that are around you. And the gender role differentiation equally assigns significance of the roles played by both genders, where women's role is often considered inferior to men. So we conclude this module, well, this unit, particularly unit 4 on gender and culture, to say that the module looks at the gendered experiences. So the marginalization of women have come from the various socializing agents that reinforce the gendered behavior. Furthermore, we have noted the initiatives by national policies to address the marginalization of women, right? We looked at the Malawi gender policy, right? That looks at how different, so specifically in Malawi, we are looking at the gender assessment that has been made to identify the inequalities that are present in communities between men and women. Okay, so that is the end of module 2. Okay. Okay, so that is the end of module 2, and then now we are going to go to module 3. So module 3, module 3 is sex and gender across cultures. Sex and gender across cultures. Okay, so before we look at the various the cross-cultural variations in gender biology, we are going to look at the definitions, right? Which is what we are going to be discussing as we move forward with gender, HIV, and development. So there are various gender-related terms that require understanding of their meaning to ensure accurate use in our age of gender fluidity and sensitivity. We are saying fluidity because the aspect of gender has sort of attract a lot of differences in terms of how people perceive the aspect of gender, which in that fluidity we are looking at the variations in culture of people who identify as men when they're women, or people who identify as women when they are men. And also the sensitivity, because we're highlighting the fact that men and women, by the virtue of being biologically different, they also have different capabilities. And we look at these expectations and how to sort of create an environment that is enabling for both genders. In the United States, for example, there are mixed feelings in regards to gender preferences, identity, and level of social acceptance in gendered issues. We are giving a reference of the United States because by far this is the only country that is experiencing a lot of these gender issues, as opposed to any other country in the world. So the first is gender analysis. So gender analysis organizes and interprets in a systematic way the information about gender relations to make clear the importance of gender differences for achieving developmental objectives. So this is a tool, right? The gender analysis is a tool that is used by developmental projects, right? That sort of gathers the information in terms of gender relations. And through this information, they come up with initiatives and activities to assist the different genders to promote the developmental objectives. And the second, we have gender assessment. So gender assessment examines how a program or a project addresses and responds to gender disparities. So after doing the the gender analysis, the gender assessment specifically looks at the objectives that have been, or the objectives and the activities that have been highlighted by a project that address the gender disparities and inequalities through their various activities. And then we have the gender equity. So we said we in the previous, so that's the first lesson of August, we looked at the differences between equity and equality, where we said equity looks at being fair, right? Providing necessary support according to the needs that have been identified. While equality looks at giving equal assistance, right? So when you are looking at the difference, the prospects of equality and equity, we realize that equality sometimes create further disparities because you might giving the equal assistance will put people in a position of still more disparities, right? So the gender equity is a process of being fair to women and men to ensure fairness, and therefore measures must be taken to compensate for the historical and social disadvantages that prevent women and men from operating on levels on play fields. And the gender equality is a state or condition that affords women and men equal enjoyment of rights, social valued goods, opportunities, and resources. So the gender equality is looking at providing equal opportunities, right? Particularly looking at the equal opportunities, for example, in businesses, in schools, and employment, and so on. And we have gender integration. So gender integration refers to strategies applied in program assessment. Gender integration refers to strategies applied in program assessment. So we use the gender integration through program assessment by looking at putting in activities that refer the differences to the gender capabilities. So we look at the program assessment through design, implementation, evaluation to take gender norms into account and compensate for gender-based inequalities. So through this design, implementation, and evaluation, a good example would be if you were part of a project that is providing we can say financial assistance to people in the community, right? Through this gender integration, you sort of make a gender analysis of those needs or differences in a community. So you find that community ya kumalawi eti ku, let's say kukaronga isiyana ndi community kusanje kapena mulanje. So you are integrating these variations according to what you have identified. And then we have the gender mainstreaming. So gender mainstreaming is a process of incorporating gender perspectives into policies, strategies, programs, project activities, administrative functions, as well as institutional culture of an organization. So because you are doing community development, gender mainstreaming is something that you're going to hear about a lot, right? And even through internship or even community participation, the aspect of gender mainstreaming is a very common term that you are going to come across, because right now project ina iliyose ikamapangidwa kuti ipangide paset imaina ionetse kunena kuti they are showing that they've made a gender assessment and they are incorporating gender mainstreaming, right, for it to be appraised. And the gender stereotypes. So the gender stereotypes, we studied that in 2 lessons ago, where we were looking at the expectations of a community on what being masculine, being feminine, or being a man or being a woman is. And then we have the gender-based violence. We looked at gender-based violence in the previous lesson, where we were saying that is derived from gender norms and roles, as well as form of unequal power relations between women and men. So it includes, but not limited to, physical, sexual, and psychological harm. And through the gender-based violence, we look at agency. So agency is a person's capability to set goals and act upon them. It may entail bargaining, negotiating, and resistance. So this is adapted from the Naila Keba definition of agency. And we have empowerment. A very important aspect when you're looking at gender is identifying the various needs, right, within a community. So having identified, it's like saying, you have identified that they have their weaknesses within their community setting. But it's useless for you to identify different needs within a society without providing assistance, right? And primarily when you're looking at inequalities, empowerment is a very important factor because it refers to the expansions of people's capability to make and act upon decisions. So that is the agency. And to transform those decisions into desired outcomes that's affecting all aspects of their lives, including decisions related to health. And we have homophobia. So is the irrational fear of or aversion of discrimination against homosexuals or homosexual behavior or culture. So the aspect of homophobia, it is embedded within culture, right? Because the reality of the world is that even although we are in modern times, many of our cultures are still conservative, right? Where we understand that we have values and expectations of a man and also a woman. So the homosexuality is something that is experiencing a lot of backlash still in many cultures. And heterosexism. So heterosexism is the presumption that everyone is heterosexual and or belief that heterosexual are naturally superior to homosexual and bisexual people. So when you're looking at this heterosexism, right, we should differentiate it with heterosexual, okay? The sexism part looks at some sort of discrimination to homosexual people, right? And superiority to heterosexual people. While heterosexual, as a definition, you've seen it there, right? It is their presumption that everyone is heterosexual. I don't know if it's showing the case up because I'm trying to show it. Here, heterosexism is here. So it is a presumption that everyone is heterosexual. So by definition, heterosexual means a person who is attracted to the opposite sex, right? That's the definition. But heterosexism is some sort of a discrimination against people who are homosexual or it can be defined as a presumption that everyone is heterosexual. And then we have men's engagement. I know you can't see it there. Men's engagement is a pragmatic approach that involves men and boys as clients and beneficiaries, right? As clients and beneficiaries, uh, as partners and as agents of change. So we are saying we involve them as clients and beneficiaries, right? For example, in a project that we're saying financial access, involving the men and boys as clients and beneficiaries, as partners and also as agents of change, because sort of assisting or voicing out to the people, the men in their community to sort of accept or assist in gender mainstreaming programs. In actively promoting gender equality, women's empowerment, and transformation of equitable definition of masculinity. And then we have sexual orientation. So this refers to one's sexual or romantic attraction, includes sexual identity, sexual behavior, and sexual desires. So under that, we have the transgender, right? Which is an umbrella term, refers to individuals who do not identify with the sex categories assigned to them. So it just means a person who identifies as the other gender as opposed to the one that they were born in, right? So there you find I've written cisgender and non-binary, right? So you just look up what cisgender and non-binary means. Cisgender and non-binary. Mm-hmm. Cisgender and non-binary. So these gender schemas are deeply in yes. So now we are looking at the gender schemas. We defined that in the previous lesson where we were looking at gender schemas, right? Which is a determination of or your interpretation of what masculine and feminine is, right? And we are saying that it is embedded within our cognitive framework, which regards what defines masculine and feminine. So these gender schemas are coming from the socialization, right? For them to come, for them to be part of you, it means you have sort of um, being part of a system that has defined what being masculine and feminine is. And finally, gender integration. So this means taking into account both differences and inequalities between women and men in program planning, implementation, and evaluation. So gender integration and gender mainstreaming go hand in hand because of the analysis perspective, where we make analysis of the needs that we have been saying again and again. The analysis of the needs differences between men and women, and also the needs differences between cultures and countries, right? Because zimakazo siana. Yes, and having identified that, that's when we can make proper planning on activities in regards to these need identification. So those were the defining factors that we will be proceeding with going forth. So unit 2 in this module looks at gender, biology, and variation across cultures. Gender, so there is the gender biology. The previous module we're looking at gender culture, so that is different. This is a gender biology and variation across cultures. So it's the biological aspect. Okay, that's the differentiation there. Okay. So in this unit, gender biology and variation across culture, we are going to look at gender theories. You can just, I don't know if you can see. You can see that? It's okay. I'll post these notes anyway after this. Okay, yeah. So it's okay even if you don't write it. So we are going to look at gender theories. We're going to look at androgyny, Hofstede's study, perceptual, spatial, and cognitive differences, conformity and obedience, gender roles, sex and sexuality. So to introduce our traditional notions of femininity and masculinity indicate that we think females and males are fundamentally different from each other. So in this effect, we think of them as two sides of a coin and of being human being. It is important to note that women and men are different biologically, which also influences certain patterns in action, which we will explain these narrations as we go along, right? So the human evolution and gender. So when you're looking at this human evolution and gender, it looks at the aspect of how the gender roles have evolved across time, right? So the studies had been made, or the different perspectives have been made that we're discussing the evolutionary principle in the previous module, right? So in prehistoric societies, we look at two major social roles: hunting and gathering, that we said, and also bearing and nursing children. So because only women could perform the latter, which is bearing and nursing children, I think I mentioned this in the second lesson, they were also primary caretakers of children for several years after birth. And because women were frequently pregnant, their roles as mothers confined them at home. So you are looking at, because of the biological aspect of being a woman, and they also have to take care of the child when they are young. The natural division there is to say that obviously when the child is born, they have to be taken care by a woman, right? So it determines that socialization or determination of the gender roles. So the evolutionary reason also explains why men are more violent than women. So in prehistoric times, men who were more willing to commit violence against and even kill other men would win out, and competition for female mates. So you are looking at just mate selection, eh? So the preferences there between females in prehistoric time was that a man needed to be aggressive and to win out the weaker males. So they thus were more likely than less violent than men to produce offspring who would then carry these male genetic violence tendencies. So what that statement means is the violent men, because they would kill the non-violent men, yes? So that gene of violence sort of carried out throughout history, because they are the ones who had the female mates and had children, as opposed to the men that were weaker. So if the human race, so we are introducing this in terms of the evolutionary principle of socialization and expectations of gender roles. So we are saying that if the human race evolved along these lines, right? Evolving along the lines of saying men needed to be violent to win out the weaker men and also get female mates, right? And also evolutionary, meaning women needed to perform the role of bearer and nurser of children. The evolutionary psychologists continue that natural selection favored those societies. Right? We learned about natural selection in biology, right? So the natural selection is just a concept of saying the strongest, right, survive, right? So because of this natural selection, those societies where men were stronger, braver, and more aggressive, and where women were more fertile and nurturing, were the ones that continued in progression. And some traits over millennia become fairly instinctual. So it means that it's sort of carried within our genetics as human beings, because it has succeeded over a long period of time, right? And those characteristics become natural, or we can say become instincts. So we know what an instinct is, it? It's not learned, it? Monkanga, do you just know what to do? Meaning that men's and women's biological natures evolved differently. Men became by nature more assertive, daring, and violent than women, because you are looking at that evolutionary expectations from a long period of time. And women became by nature more gentle, nurturing, and maternal than men. So to this extent, it is true. And these scholars add that traditional gender roles for women and men make sense from the evolutionary standpoint, right? And attempts to change them go beyond sex's biological nature. So this in turn implies that existing gender inequalities must continue because it is rooted in biology. So what they mean there is to say they're trying to explain the evolutionary principle within the inequalities that are present between gender roles. So further, this evolutionary principle is critiqued. So it is critiqued because the challenge of evolutionary explanation on several grounds. That first, much greater gender variation in behavior and attitudes existed in prehistoric times than the evolutionary explanation assumes. So what this means is that the evolutionary explanation only explains the hunting and gathering and having children, but they don't explain the other variations that were present in prehistoric times as well, right? For example, various communities, for example, the Amazons as well, right, that have been there in prehistoric times, they don't explain that narrative. So it's just looking at a specific area and assuming that this is how men and women have evolved, but we are saying that that evolution is different because the experiences were also different. And second, even if the biological differences did influence gender roles in prehistoric time, these differences are largely irrelevant in modern societies. So we are saying it's irrelevant in terms of modern societies because now we are looking at how technically when you're looking at the presentation in present day where men and women both have jobs, right? So and actually people don't go hunting anymore and so on. It's just more of financial leverage, right? So it's not necessarily explaining, for example, why some men are still more violent, because the violence does not specifically project social success, but rather we can say that determination of social success is just how you engage in social relations, which right now, Timothy, street credit, that's what we call it, right? Or in psychology we call it social intelligence, right? How you interrelate with one another. And the third is human environments throughout the millennia have simply been too diverse to permit the simple straightforward biological development that evolutionary explanation assumes. And fourth, evolutionary argument implicitly justify existing gender equalities by implying the need to continue women and men in their traditional roles. So there has been discussions in terms of the expectations of men to be brave, right? A very good example has been, it's been circulating on social media where men have been saying that in a household, right? And go now save, and then you hear something, right? And then the expectation there is to say that the man has to be the one getting up, right? So a lot of men have been expressing their concern and saying, you know, what if I die and so on, right? I'm also a human, irrespective of that expectation by society to say that because you're a man, it means you have to be brave, right? So you are looking at many of these continuation of traditional gender roles. So now the term that is being called is soft guy era. Have you heard of this? Yes, soft guy era, right? Yeah, so it's trying to determine how there's a change within the gender relations. Any questions? Okay. So now we are going to look at the gender theories. So there are three gender theories that we're going to focus on. Sex or biological theory of gender, that's the first. The second is the social role theory. The third is materialistic feminism. So sex or biological theory of gender. So this gender just looks at the differences between the genders, right? That have been categorized in terms of the reproductive system. A man is a man because of their sexual organs. A woman is a woman because of their sexual organs. So we are saying that the differences between a man and a woman is that a woman has got the capability to have children, right? They have a womb, right? That is the key differences between the man and the woman. So the concept of a woman in this theory is developed by the virtue of a woman's possession of a womb. Hence, she is capitalized as a man with a womb. So this theory, when you're looking at sex or biological theory of gender, it determines now when we are looking at the transgenderism, a man who changes his gender to be, to not just to identify, but then changes all his physical features to be a woman. So you know that now men have surgeries where they can, doctors can reconstruct a vagina, right? You've heard about that. But then what differentiates a woman who is a transgender woman with an actual woman is the fact that the other one has a womb and a doctor can't surgically reconstruct something like this. So moreover, the theory argues that women and men would necessarily think and feel differently because of the differences in how their hormones and brains work. So this is actually accurate, right? when you're looking at the hormonal aspect, because men and women have got different hormones, right? So we understand that men have got testosterone and progesterone, right? And women have got estrogen and progesterone as well. So this determines the various we can say, for example, the various sensitivity and also projection of various activities. So the biological view of gender is supported by various cross-cultural studies that found that common features of gender, for instance, men are found to be more aggressive and stronger than women, which suggests innate biological differences. Do you know the reason why there's this more aggression in men than women? Have you heard of anything or read anywhere where they talk about these differences, why it's present? Okay, so we're saying that men and women have different hormones, right? So the hormone that has been termed as um, creating aggression in men is the one testosterone, right? So we know that women also have testosterone, and there are some women who've got higher levels of testosterone that is called abnormal in women, right? And therefore, it is these levels of testosterone that would sort of create aggression in women that is not considered natural because of the high levels of testosterone. Okay, so it's one of those features. So the argument is to say it's not necessarily to say that testosterone is the one that causes aggression, but sometimes the circumstances within a society will sort of stimulate the gonads to produce a lot of testosterone and therefore cause aggression, right? So the criticism of the biological sex gender theory is that the theory has been critiqued in the sense that productive characteristics of both genders represent only a part of the complex set of criteria between which the society come to distinguish femaleness and maleness. So what this means is that saying that yes, men and women are different in terms of biology, but then the differences are far more complex and they should not look at only the biological makeup. And equally, the importance of the role of social cultural assigning roles of both man and woman. For instance, women are given certain forms of job of work, right? So yes, having the biological differences of, let's say, having a womb does not determine whether a woman, for example, can work in various aspects, because you are looking at the various capabilities that a person has, right? For example, previously we found that it was women found it hard to sort of infiltrate the science, right? And panoba to man now there are a few more women in STEM education disciplines. And that is so because the assumption previously was say a woman cannot do math, right? And cannot participate in technology, when there are various women scientists that have been identified that are part of it. That when you're looking at the aspect of STEM disciplines, it is not related to someone's biological makeup. And then we have the social role theory. So the social role theory is said that gender differences are socially constructed and are subject to change. The social role theory states that men and women become masculine and feminine as a result of social conditioning. So we have identified the various aspects of this set through the gender socialization, which are learned and internalized through childhood to the end of life. So a child comes to learn the gender roles that relate to their biological sex through interaction with social structures that we have identified. And the theorists have used the social role theory to define gender conditioning by society. So even although an individual might have different gender perspectives, right, they will be conditioned or conform to the various perspectives of the society that they're in. An example would be if you grow up in the US, Muna, between the ages of 1 to 15, right? Muna bamba wana ambassador, muna nchito kumekuje, and then the job ends and then you have to go back to your own country, which is the country maybe is an African country and predominantly a very conservative culture. So if you move, let's say, to maybe Nigeria or Ghana in cities that are not the major cities, you sort of have to, Ngakale, you've been born there or you grew up there between the ages of 1 to 15. you sort of have to assimilate back the culture of the country that you're in, right? So this is common when you're looking at how the social role theory, when you're looking at how white people, when they come to Malawi, they sort of exhibit what they have learned the social role of a woman and the man is supposed to be. Yes? Yes? Munaona zumba kabula kumaye kunamata. Ndoda kazima mvazi tenje. Why are they doing that? Because that is their expectation. Say, kuti muntu ankasama inaonesa miyendo. That's what they think that a lot of African countries are still doing now. So the gender division of labor is also a function of social allocation of roles to women and men, leading to inequalities, marginalization, and domination of women by men. So this social role theory determines how normally in societies, because the women are given the caretaker role, they generally do not get socialized enough to perform in other disciplines. So therefore, naturally, women would say, "Ndibira unesi," for example, because that is something that they have been doing for a very long time. So it becomes natural, as opposed to someone saying maybe they are doing marketing or maybe they are doing technological disciplines and so on. And furthermore, the social role theory developed three categories of social construction of gender. So the first is the gender polarization. So the gender polarization is just a determination of that polarization which creates differences, specific differences that puts men on one end and puts women on the other end, like the differences between day and night, right? And androcentrism, which is creates a some sort of perspective that assumes that there's the male superiority as opposed to women, and therefore creates specific experiences of women being put in unequal situations. And the third is the biological essentialism. So this is the first two assumptions are a result of the biological differences. So what this means is that the assumption of gender polarization, right, that men and women are as different as day and night, and that men should be superior, is within the aspect of saying that it's there because of the biological differences, which are the organs that they have. So the criticism of this theory is that the social role theory has been criticized of in its inadequacies. The first is that it does not put into account the different forms of femininity and masculinity. So what this means is looking at the variations that have been presented across history and also across cultures of what femininity and masculinity is, because they are different across cultures. And it does not take into account or recognizes the changes that occur with time and within lives of men and women. So the changes that occur determine the fact that men and women roles have been different across cultures. They have been changing and they are still changing up until now. And therefore, not recognizing this creates some sort of imbalances or projects an inaccurate presentation or prediction of the male and female roles. And the third is that it does not explain the processes that is involved in taking gender roles. So it doesn't look at the processes in terms of socialization. So that is also an inadequacy. And the fourth, it does not explain how resistance can occur through feminist movements. So looking at this criticism, we move towards the materialistic feminism. So particularly when you are looking at the revolution in terms of feminist movements, it is within the aspect of materialistic feminism. So this is a theory that looks at conventional feminist theory and focuses on how social construction of gender creates social hierarchies. Because of that construction of the differences between women and men, it has created social hierarchies in the regard of saying if women are predominantly for example, not working, right? It means that they don't have financial leverages and they don't have access to resources, right? And if women are predominantly doing the jobs that are less paying, it puts them in a disadvantaged position. Further, the theory states that the social construction in gender is what leads to differentiation of the two genders. And the social differentiation of gender also determines the hierarchy and the division of labor which is conditioned by it. The theory also suggests that social constructions are a system of power and control and produces a set of social relations in which women are treated as inferior, subordinates, and unequal to men. So it is because of gender differentiation that leads to gender division of labor, and the division of labor roles along gender lines place women in underprivileged positions. So we are looking at the various aspects within society where if women don't have access to education, they don't get educated and they are forced to be in the domestic realm, and they are further disadvantaged. And even if they get an education, but then they are looking at the cultural expectations of taking care of a household. In the previous lesson, I was giving an example of saying, if a husband and wife wanted to continue pursue their education, right? So the man would, between the two, the woman would say, "Amuna mpange kwenu sinanga ineyo nanganisa mantau yote nzivanga sikundilibet." So you're looking at this aspect where it's creating that social differentiation because of the societal expectations of a woman, that creates some sort of time imbalances and inability for her to achieve the various socioeconomic expectations. It is, however, not worthy that these gender equalities can be deconstructed. So the key point is to say within this is that these inequalities can be deconstructed because they have been socially constructed. So it means societies can change their perspectives in gender relations. As observed that if women and men are recognized as just being a man and a woman by the virtue, but not of social construction, we can modify the gender inequalities since society and its values changes over time. So this is the key perspective of the materialistic feminism. Any questions? Okay, so now we look at androgyny. Androgyny. So this is a gender that we identified that was found by anthropologists, right? With the fact that if culture does not affect gender roles, socialization, what we experience as girls and boys strongly influence how we develop as men and women in terms of behavior and attitudes. And this illustrates the important dimension of gender and is evidenced by socialization. So an approach of examining conventional gender roles and stereotypes is androgyny. We are saying an approach of re-examining because we are determining the fact that gender roles have been determined by the differences between men and women, right? But then how do we explain the androgynous gender, right? So which is a blend between feminine and masculine attributes in the same individual. So the person does not neatly fit between a man and a woman. So if we say that the androgynous person has got both sexual organs of a man and a woman, right? How do you classify them as being a man or do you classify them as being a woman? We gave an example of that athlete, right? So she's got the physical features of being a man, but she's actually a woman, right? So if she sort of, maybe if she went through genetic testing, you'd find some of these um, maybe they would find some of these androgynous genes. So I was getting my marker because I want to explain something in terms of the androgynous genes, right? So when you are looking at being male and female, right? We know that male is what? Yes, XY. Change, right? Right? According to chromosomes. Female is XX. See, George? Okay, so then there are those people who can be XXY, right? And be male, right? So if they're saying kuti bali double X, asinde kuti natural awukanga tudi alingati beka ntsika na bishonjo, right? And then you can find a female who is also what? XXY. You are looking at this when you are looking at the chromosomes, right? So you find a female who also has an XXY chromosome, and you can also find a man who has got the what? The XXY chromosome. But they are born with the just male organs, right? And this female is also born with what? Female organs. So this Y chromosome here is what determines some of the features that are present in the differences.